My security chief's voice came through the speaker. "Sir, they're claiming it's an emergency." I almost laughed. Not the kind of laugh that comes from humor. The other kind. The quiet one that slips out when something finally happens exactly the way you knew it would. I walked over to the security monitor mounted beside my desk. The screen showed the front gate. And standing outside it were my parents. 7 years. 7 years since I last saw them. Now they stood on the other side of my gate like strangers waiting outside a hotel they couldn't afford. My mother kept adjusting her coat like she was cold. Even though it wasn't cold outside, my father paced beside the rental car, checking his phone every few seconds. They looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. Just diminished. "Do you want us to let them in?" the guard asked. "No," I said. I kept watching the screen. My mother pressed the intercom button. Her voice came through the speaker in the hallway. "Daniel, honey." "It's Mom, honey." That word almost made me choke. 7 years ago the last word she used for me was mistake. And now it was honey. "We just need to talk," she said quickly. "There's been a situation." I didn't answer. I let the silence stretch. On the screen my father rubbed his face and whispered something to her. She nodded nervously and "Press the button again, Daniel. Please, this is serious, serious." That word felt strange coming from her. 7 years ago, the night everything ended, she told me my life wasn't serious enough to keep. I leaned closer to the monitor. For the first time I noticed the details. The car wasn't just a rental, it was the cheapest model they offered. My father's jacket had a loose thread hanging from the sleeve. And my mother's handbag, the one she used to brag about at country club dinners, was cracked along the side. They looked like people who had run out of options. Which meant something had finally happened. Something big. My phone buzzed on the desk. A message. From my lawyer, foreclosure documents finalized. I read the message twice. Then I looked back at the screen. My parents were still standing there, shifting nervously in the driveway light, waiting, begging without saying the word. 7 years ago I stood on their porch holding a backpack and $43. Now they were the one standing outside a door. Funny how life circles back. I pressed the intercom button. For a moment neither of them spoke. They just looked up toward the camera. My mother forced a smile. "Daniel," she said softly. "We really need your help." I leaned against the wall and answered calmly. "You're not here for help." The silence that followed was immediate. Heavy. "You're here," I said quietly, "because you finally figured out who owns your house." My father froze. My mother's smile disappeared. And for the first time since they arrived, they both looked afraid. I let the silence sit between us for a moment longer. Because the truth was, this moment hadn't started today. It started on my 18th birthday. The night my mother told me I didn't belong in my own family. And the night I learned exactly how easy it is to become invisible. But back then, I had no idea that being invisible would become the most powerful advantage of my life. And the strange part, the worst thing that ever happened to me, was also the beginning of everything. But that night, standing in our living room, I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was that my life was about to end in 20 minutes. Or at least, that's what my mother thought. My 18th birthday should have been simple, nothing big, nothing dramatic. I was expecting a grocery store cake, maybe the chocolate one my mom used to buy when I was younger, mostly. I was waiting for the envelope, the college papers. My acceptance letter had arrived 2 weeks earlier. State University. Nothing fancy, but it felt like a door opening somewhere far away from our quiet little town. All we needed were the final financial forms signed. My mother had promised we'd finish them on my birthday, fresh start for adulthood, she'd said. I believed her. When I pulled into the driveway after my shift at the bookstore, the house looked normal. Lights on, my father's truck in the driveway, the faint smell of something cooking through the kitchen window. For a moment, everything felt steady, safe. I remember standing there with my car door open, thinking maybe things were finally moving forward. I grabbed my backpack and walked inside. The living room was quiet. My mother stood near the coffee table holding a stack of printed papers, bank statements. I realized later my father sat in his recliner. The television was off. That should have been the first warning. He never turned the television off. "Happy birthday," I said, trying to sound cheerful. Neither of them answered. Instead, my mother walked toward me slowly and placed the papers on the table. Her expression was strange. Not angry, something colder, You need to sit down, she said. I stayed standing. What's going on? She exhaled like someone preparing to deliver a speech she had rehearsed too many times. I'm going to say this once, she said. Then she looked at my father. He stared at his coffee mug. Daniel isn't your father. The sentence landed in the room like something heavy dropped on hardwood. I didn't react at first. It didn't make sense. My father had taught me how to ride a bike. He coached my little league team. He drove 6 hours once just to watch me perform in a school play. I laughed nervously. That's not funny. My mother didn't smile. It's not a joke. My father still didn't look up. She continued speaking like she was reading a grocery list. 18 years ago I made a mistake. I had an affair. You were the result. The room felt smaller. Like the air had suddenly been removed. I looked at my father. Dad, he rubbed his forehead slowly. We found out recently, he muttered. But something about the way he said it sounded wrong. My mother's next words confirmed it. We've known for months, 6 months, she later admitted. 6 months of dinners, conversations. Family movie nights, 6 months of pretending everything was normal. You waited until today, I asked. You're legally an adult now, she said simply. Then she pointed toward the front door, which means our responsibility is finished. For a second I thought she was joking, but then I noticed the backpack sitting beside the door, already packed. My stomach dropped. What is that? That's your stuff, she said. Stuff, clothes, some toiletries, and my college papers. Her eyes didn't move. There won't be any college. I felt the world tilt slightly. What do you mean, the college fund is gone? She replied calmly. We renovated the kitchen last year. My voice cracked. You promised that money was for school. We changed our priorities. The words sounded so casual. Like canceling a dinner reservation. I turned to my father again. Say something. He looked at my mother first, then at me. His voice was barely above a whisper. Margaret has made her decision. That moment hurt more than anything she said. 18 years of calling him dad, and he chose silence. My mother picked up the backpack and placed it in my hands. Inside was $43. Exactly, I think that's generous, she said. Then she opened the door. The cold air rushed in. You should leave before the neighbors start asking questions. I stood there for a long time, waiting for someone to say this had gone too far. Waiting for someone to stop it. Nobody did. Finally, my mother placed her hand on my shoulder. Not gently. And pushed. 20 minutes. That's how long it took to lose a family. When the door shut behind me, I heard the deadbolt click immediately. Through the window I saw my mother pour herself a glass of wine. Like she had just finished a difficult chore. I stood on the porch holding the backpack, watching the house that had been my entire world. Then I walked to my car. I didn't know where I was going. But I knew one thing. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was realizing that everything I believed about my life had already been quietly erased, and I was about to find out just how far my mother had gone to make sure I never came back. The first night in my car felt temporary. Like camping. That's what I told myself anyway. I parked in the far corner of a grocery store lot where the lights were dim and nobody paid attention to old sedans. My car was a faded blue Honda that had survived 3 previous owners and more winters than it deserved. I folded the back seat down and stretched out with the blanket I'd grabbed from my room. It smelled faintly like laundry detergent and dust. For a while I stared at the ceiling fabric above me, waiting for the panic to hit. But it didn't. Not yet. At 18 you still believe things will somehow fix themselves overnight. I figured maybe my father would text me, maybe my mother would cool down, maybe the door would reopen. By morning none of that had happened. My phone stayed silent. The second night was colder. I drove to a Walmart parking lot because I'd heard they didn't chase people away if you stayed quiet. There were 2 other cars there with fogged windows. People inside them pretending they weren't living the same life as me. I learned quickly which parking lots had security guards, which gas stations left their bathrooms unlocked, which places had outlets where you could charge your phone without being asked questions. By day 4 I understood something. My mother hadn't just kicked me out, she'd prepared the world for it. I discovered that when I walked into my Aunt Jennifer's house. She opened the door only a few inches. Her eyes moved over me like she was inspecting something unpleasant. I just need a place to stay for a few days, I said. Her expression didn't change. Margaret told us everything. My stomach dropped. What did she say? Jennifer folded her arms. That you've been stealing from her. I blinked. That you've been using drugs, she added quietly. And that she tried to help you. The words didn't even sound real. She said you might show up asking for money. The door began closing slowly. You need to get help, Daniel, then it shut. That was the moment I realized the story had already been written. And I was the villain. The next week got worse. My bank account was empty. $3,000 I'd saved from working at the bookstore since sophomore year, gone. The bank teller showed me the withdrawal record. The name on the slip made my hands shake. Megan. My best friend since 3rd grade. She had access to the account from when we planned a senior trip. Together, I called her from the parking lot. Her voice sounded nervous. Your mom said you weren't thinking clearly. What does that mean? She said you'd waste the money. You stole it. I protected it. She replied softly. Then she hung up. I sat in the car staring at my phone for a long time. The betrayal didn't come all at once. It arrived piece by piece. Tyler, my ex, posted a picture online of me washing my hair in a gas station sink. The caption said, "When karma catches up to thieves." 200 people liked it. Kids I used to help with homework. Neighbors who used to wave when I mowed our lawn. Everyone had already chosen a version of me. And it wasn't the real one. Winter arrived early that year. The heater in my car had died 2 winters before, but I'd never bothered fixing it. Now it mattered. I wore 3 shirts to bed. 2 pairs of socks. Sometimes I'd run the engine for 10 minutes just to feel warm air before the gas gauge scared me into turning it off. Most nights I barely slept. Your body never relaxes when you're cold. Or scared. One night an ice storm rolled through town. The temperature dropped fast. By midnight the inside of the windshield had frost on it. I wrapped the blanket tighter around my shoulders. My fingers were numb. I remember thinking something strange in that moment. Maybe my mother was right. Maybe I really was a mistake. Because it felt like the world had decided I didn't belong anywhere. I must have dozed off at some point. When I woke up, the engine wouldn't start. The battery was dead. The silence inside the car felt enormous. For a long time I just sat there, watching my breath in the cold air. Eventually I pushed the door open and stepped outside. My legs felt weak. The sky was still dark. Across the street there was a small diner with lights on. I hadn't noticed it before. The sign simply said open. I walked toward it slowly. Not because I had a plan, just because it was the only warm place left. At that moment I didn't know that walking into that diner was the single decision that would change the entire direction of my life. Because behind that counter was someone who could see something in me that everyone else had already decided was gone.
The bell above the diner door rang when I pushed it open. It was the kind of soft sound you barely notice unless the room is quiet. And the room was quiet. Early morning diners have a certain stillness to them. Coffee brewing somewhere behind the counter. A radio playing low enough that you can't quite hear the words. A few regulars sitting in the same seats they've probably used for years. I stepped inside and felt the heat immediately. It wrapped around me like a blanket. For a moment I just stood there, letting the feeling return to my hands. Behind the counter was an older woman pouring coffee into a thick ceramic mug. She had short silver hair and the kind of posture that made it clear she had spent her life working on her feet. She looked up. Her eyes moved over me once. Not judging, just observing. "Sit," she said, nodding toward a booth near the window. I slid into the seat slowly. The vinyl was cracked from years of use, but it was warm. Warmer than my car. Warmer than anything had felt in weeks. I didn't even look at the menu, because I already knew something she didn't. I had 60 cents in my pocket. That wasn't enough for coffee. A minute later, she walked over with a mug and placed it in front of me. "Drink," she said. The smell alone made my chest tighten. I wrapped my hands around the mug. The warmth hurt at first. That's what happens when your fingers have been numb too long. She returned a few minutes later with a plate. Eggs, toast, hash browns. I looked up immediately. I didn't order that. I know. I can't pay for it, she shrugged. Good thing I didn't ask you to. I stared at the plate. It had been days since I ate something that wasn't from a dollar menu. You look like someone who could use a decent breakfast, she said. I tried to say thank you, but the words didn't come out right. Something about warm food after weeks of pretending you're fine breaks something open inside you. I ate slowly at first, then faster. Halfway through the meal, I realized my hands were shaking. Not from cold this time. She sat down across from me during a quiet moment between customers. Name? She asked. Daniel. I'm Sarah. She didn't ask the questions most people would ask. Where do you live? Why do you look like you slept outside? Instead, she said something simple. You're not the first kid to walk in here with nowhere to go. I looked down at the table. My mom told everyone I'm a drug addict. Sarah leaned back slightly. Well, she said calmly, you don't look like one. That sentence felt heavier than it should have, because it was the first time in weeks someone had chosen to believe what they saw instead of what they heard. She wiped her hands on a towel. I need help around here sometimes. I blinked. What kind of help? Cleaning, inventory, small stuff. I don't have experience. She smiled faintly. You know how to hold a broom? I nodded. Congratulations, she said. You're qualified. I laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed in a month. There's a storage room in the back, she continued. Cot's old, but it works. Shower's temperamental. But if you kick the pipe under the sink, it usually behaves. I stared at her. You're serious? Completely. Why? Sarah didn't answer right away. Instead, she poured herself a cup of coffee. Then she said quietly, because a long time ago someone helped my daughter when she needed it. She took a sip, and I promised myself I'd return the favor whenever I could. That was the moment something inside my chest loosened. Not fixed, but loosened. I finished the last bite of toast, then followed her toward the back room. The storage room wasn't much. A narrow cot, a metal shelf, a small shower behind a thin curtain. But it felt like a palace compared to the back seat of my car. That morning I swept floors, stacked boxes, counted napkins and ketchup packets. Simple work. Honest work. And for the first time since my birthday, I felt like I might survive. What I didn't know yet was that Sarah's diner had another regular. Someone who came in every morning at exactly the same time. Someone who had been quietly watching everything. And 3 weeks later, that man would ask me one question that would change my life forever.
3 weeks passed before I really noticed him, not because he was invisible, but because he never tried to stand out. Every morning at exactly 6:15 a.m., the bell above the diner door would ring once. He would walk in, nod politely to Sarah, and sit in the same stool at the far end of the counter. Black coffee. We'd toast, no butter, no small talk. His clothes were always the same too, plain black t-shirt, dark jeans, simple sneakers, the kind of outfit that disappears in a crowd. If you saw him on the street, you'd probably assume he worked in an office somewhere, but there were small details that didn't match that story. The laptop he carried was expensive, not flashy, just quiet, high-end, and he tipped 40% every single day, exactly 40, the first time I served him coffee. He thanked me like I'd done something impressive. Appreciate it. Most people don't say that when you refill their mug. For the first couple weeks, that was our entire conversation. Coffee, toast, thank you. Then one morning he watched me reorganizing the reservation board behind the counter. The diner used a chaotic system of scribbled notes and sticky papers that nobody understood except Sarah. I couldn't stand it. So I started color-coding everything. Blue for morning orders, yellow for deliveries, green for large reservations. It took me 20 minutes. Suddenly everything made sense. The man at the counter noticed. I could feel his eyes following the system. After a while he closed his laptop. You like solving problems? He asked. The question surprised me, I guess. He turned his stool slightly toward me. What would you do if you had 50 employees in 3 time zones who all needed to attend meetings? I blinked. That sounds like someone else's problem. He smiled slightly. It is. I thought about it for a moment while wiping down the counter. Rotate the inconvenience, I said. He raised an eyebrow. Explain, don't make the same people suffer every time. 1 week the New York team stays late. Next week the California team wakes up early. Spread the bad schedule around. He leaned back. That took you about 8 seconds. Is that bad? It took my management team 3 weeks. I shrugged. Sometimes people overthink simple stuff. He watched me for a few seconds longer. Then he extended his hand. Marcus Harrison, the name, meant nothing to me, but Sarah nearly dropped a coffee pot behind the counter when she heard it. Later she told me why. Marcus Harrison had sold his first tech company for millions before he turned 30. The second one made even more. The startup he was running now had offices in 3 cities, which explained the meeting problem. For the next few mornings, Marcus started asking small questions. Not personal ones. Practical ones. How would you organize a warehouse with limited space? How would you manage customer complaints without hiring more staff? How would you improve a scheduling system that constantly breaks? I answered the best I could, usually while wiping tables or stacking plates. One morning he watched me fix Sarah's ancient laptop. It had been overheating for months. I unscrewed the back panel and removed 20 years of dust from the fan. The computer ran like new. Marcus laughed quietly. You're wasted in a diner. I shook my head. I'm lucky to be here. A few days later he said something that made me pause. I have an internship opening. I stared at him. I don't even know how to code. You will. He said it like it wasn't complicated. $15 an hour. That number felt unreal, but there's a condition. He added, what? You have to learn fast. I nodded immediately. That night Sarah let me use her computer after closing. The internet became my classroom. Coding videos, free tutorials, endless practice. Most nights I studied until 3 in the morning, then woke up at 5 to help open the diner. It was exhausting, but every new thing I learned felt like another brick in a bridge leading away from the life I'd lost. Marcus never pushed. He just watched quietly, occasionally correcting a mistake, occasionally asking a harder question. 3 months later, I wasn't just an intern. I was solving problems his engineers hadn't touched yet, but the real idea, the one that would eventually change everything, didn't come from Marcus. It came from 5 tired nurses sitting in Sarah's diner during their lunch break, and the complaint they made that afternoon would quietly start the chain of events that turned my life upside down. It started quietly, the way big things often do. I was on my lunch break at Sarah's diner, eating a cold sandwich because I hadn't had time to heat it. 5 nurses from the local hospital came in, hats and scrubs still damp from the early snow, and slid into the booth across from me. They were exhausted. You could see it in the way their shoulders slumped and their voices cracked when they spoke. I don't know how we keep messing this up, one of them muttered. I tilted my head. Messing what up? Their eyes widened, a little defensively. They clearly weren't used to strangers asking questions. The schedule, said another nurse. Night shifts. Day shifts, no one can figure it out. People get overworked, others don't get enough hours. We spend half our time fixing mistakes instead of caring for patients. I nodded slowly. I'd seen similar chaos at Marcus's startup, rotating inconvenience, spreading the burden evenly. It wasn't rocket science, but hospitals. Hospitals had more moving parts than any startup I'd worked with. Do you mind if I ask a few questions? I said. They hesitated, then nodded. I started sketching on the back of a diner napkin, scribbles and arrows, circles and colors. A system where availability, preferences, and fairness were tracked clearly. No one person would get stuck with every undesirable shift by the time they finished their lunch. I had something usable. You're serious? One of them asked. Try it for the next week, I said. I didn't expect miracles, but by the end of the week, the nurses were emailing me from the hospital, thanking me, smiling faces instead of exhausted frowns. Shifts finally made sense. When Marcus saw the napkin sketch, his expression was unreadable for a moment, then he smiled, a small, rare smile. You just solved a problem my team has been stuck on for months, he said. I mean, it's just common sense, I shrugged. He shook his head. No. You saw something we didn't. That was the moment everything shifted. He offered me $5,000 for 10% of whatever I created out of it. I couldn't believe it. $5,000. For a napkin sketch. For an idea I hadn't even polished yet. But Marcus had seen potential. Not just in the idea but in me. I took the money, invested it in building a simple app, nothing fancy, just functional, reliable, and tested with the nurses. By the third month, downloads were growing. Hospital administrators were calling, departments wanted enterprise solutions. I was still sleeping in Sarah's storage room, still running on coffee and determination. But now, every hour I spent learning to code, every late night and early morning, started to feel like an investment in something real. By the end of that first year, my app MediShift had 100,000 downloads. Revenue started rolling in. I could feel myself standing on the edge of something I hadn't imagined was possible. And somewhere deep down, a quiet satisfaction had begun to grow. Because for the first time since my birthday, I felt in control. Not just of my life, but of what would happen to those who had abandoned me. And 7 years of planning, patience, and quiet calculation were already beginning to line up perfectly. I didn't know it yet, but the winter in my car, the betrayal, the lies, they were all preparing me for this. And the real reckoning was still waiting. By the time I turned 21, the diner had become my headquarters in a way most people wouldn't understand. The storage room where I slept doubled as my workspace. My laptop balanced precariously on a stack of cardboard boxes, the smell of coffee and frying bacon was the background music to long nights of coding. I had been teaching myself every skill I needed: coding, scheduling algorithms, app design, database management, even basic finance. Every tutorial, every YouTube video, every forum post became a building block. Marcus gave me guidance, but he mostly watched. He didn't hand me solutions. He let me discover them, stumble, and refine. The MediShift app grew faster than I ever expected. By the time I had a functional beta, the nurses I had originally helped became my testers, sending me feedback in the small moments between shifts. Their frustration became my data. Their stress became my insight. I made sure each change solved real problems, not just theoretical ones. One day, Marcus called me into the office after I'd finished debugging a particularly stubborn scheduling glitch. "You're no longer an intern," he said, leaning back in his chair, hands folded. "You're designing the systems. Everything the team touches now goes through your blueprint." I nodded, swallowing a strange mix of pride and disbelief, but he added, "We're scaling fast. You need to think bigger. Hospitals aren't the limit." That night, I stayed up until 3 in the morning, sketching out enterprise-level solutions. Supply chains, human resource scheduling, billing workflows. Every inefficiency became an opportunity. Every flaw in the system became a line in my strategy. Sarah had grown used to my long hours. She never asked why I was there so late, just brought me coffee and a plate of food without comment. Quiet support, no judgment. Meanwhile, back in my hometown, the rumors hadn't stopped. My mother still painted me as a cautionary tale, a drug-addicted, ungrateful child who had vanished. My father said nothing. Just let her spin the story. I didn't care, not yet. What I cared about was building something that could not be ignored. Something so effective that it would leave a mark on hospitals, on technology, and eventually, on the people who had tried to erase me. By 22, I had moved out of Sarah's storage room, but not into luxury. I bought a modest apartment. One where the doorman didn't ask questions, and I could work in peace. The city around me was bustling, full of people chasing their own chaos. I liked it that way. Nobody knew my story. Every night, I coded. Every day, I refined. Every moment was deliberate, slowly, inexorably. My work became more than an app. It became a system, a business, a network of solutions that people couldn't ignore. And in the quiet moments, when I allowed myself to think about the past, I realized something I hadn't admitted before. The anger I had felt for my parents, the betrayal, the lies. The abandonment was no longer just pain, it was fuel. Fuel I intended to use, because one day, every choice I made, every line of code I wrote, and every step I took was going to intersect with the people who had written me off. And when that happened, they wouldn't recognize the version of me standing across from them. But I would. And I'd remember every winter night in the car, every stolen dollar, every friend who had abandoned me. The reckoning wasn't coming yet. But it was being built, line by line, quietly, invisibly. And I was the architect. And as I closed my laptop that night, Sarah knocked on the door. "You should eat something." "You look like hell," she said. I smiled faintly. "I will," but even as I went to the kitchen, I couldn't shake the feeling that the moment when all the pieces fell into place was drawing closer. And when it did, the world would finally see exactly what they had lost. By the time I turned 24, MediShift had exploded beyond anything I could have imagined. Hospitals across the state were calling. Enterprise deals were on the table. My small diner sketch had become a fully functional platform. Marcus's quiet mentorship had evolved into a partnership. He trusted me completely, and I trusted myself more than ever. But amidst all the growth, I never forgot the people who had written me off: my mother, my father, Megan, the friends who had chosen gossip over truth. Every lie, every betrayal, every door slammed in my face was still there, tucked behind a layer of controlled calm I had learned to carry. It started subtly. I had been living frugally, saving obsessively. Every dollar I earned was logged. Every transaction carefully calculated, nothing flashy, nothing noticeable, but behind the scenes. I began acquiring pieces of a puzzle that had haunted me for years. It began with my mother's favorite creditors. The small mortgage servicing company handling their home loan went up for sale. I bought it quietly. No one knew. Every late fee, every extension request, they would soon be decisions I controlled. Then came small legal acquisitions. Shares in businesses where my mother had invested, minor holdings in companies she thought she was lucky to be part, every purchase invisible, untraceable, but slowly weaving a web. Meanwhile, MediShift kept growing. My nights were long, but the satisfaction of seeing tangible results, users solving their scheduling problems, hospitals thanking me, Marcus quietly shaking his head in admiration, was addictive in a way nothing else had been. Megan resurfaced quietly, too. She reached out, timid, desperate. She wanted forgiveness. She wanted to help. I didn't respond immediately. I let her linger in the shadow for weeks, feeding me details about my parents, about their habits, about the ways they tried to convince themselves I didn't exist. Every word she whispered became ammunition for the quiet plan I was building. And then came the subtle ironies of success. My mother, who bragged endlessly about her country club memberships, shopped at stores where I owned shares. She ate at restaurants using scheduling software I had designed. Every purchase she made, every interaction with the world she thought she controlled, was quietly connected back to me. I never flaunted it, I never posted about it. There was no spectacle, just the slow, unrelenting certainty that the truth would eventually arrive at their doorstep. Then, one day, the tip arrived: a rental car, designer clothes bought on credit, screenshots of a Forbes article, my parents, desperate and clueless, standing outside the gate of the estate I had purchased, the very estate they had dreamed of living in. The years of waiting, the winters in a car, the betrayals, the loss, it all converged at that moment. I watched them shift nervously, checking their phones, rehearsing their lies. They pressed the intercom. My mother's voice, once filled with rage, now trembled. "Sweetie, it's an emergency. Please, we need to talk." I let them wait a minute, 2 minutes, 5. When I finally pressed the intercom, my voice was calm, steady, controlled. "There's no emergency," I said. And for the first time in years, I smiled, not the smile of a child hoping for approval, but the quiet, absolute satisfaction of someone who had waited patiently for justice to arrive. Because the reckoning wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, it was inevitable, and now, it had a front row audience. The panic on their faces was subtle at first. My mother's perfectly practiced mask faltered, just for a second. Her hands tightened around the intercom button like she could squeeze reality back into the way she wanted it. My father's eyes darted between the gate and his wife, searching for guidance, for any plan that might salvage them. There was none. I took my time. Every step I made toward the intercom felt measured, deliberate. My heels clicked on the marble floor, each one echoing like a countdown in a courtroom. The sounds were louder than any words I could have said. "There's no emergency," I repeated. My mother's voice cracked. But your parents are home, everything you have to understand." I let her stumble over the words, let her frustration bloom into panic. I didn't interrupt. I didn't justify. I didn't explain. "You're broke," I said. The intercom fell silent for a moment. Then my mother stammered, voice tight with desperation. "What do you mean?" "I own your mortgage. Every payment you've struggled to make. every extension you begged for, every excuse you tried to hide behind it's mine. Every decision about this house is mine. You could almost hear the air being sucked out of the rental car where they were standing. The designer clothes, the borrowed confidence. All meaningless in the face of something they had never anticipated. You can't, my father began. You already lost, I said softly. Megan's role, quietly feeding me information all these months, had ensured I knew every desperate plan they tried. Every attempt to salvage their finances, every lie they told themselves about recovery, and every time they made a move, I was 2 steps ahead. The consequences were precise, legal, calculated. No one could accuse me of revenge in the moment. It was all business. Ownership, contracts, filings, everything clean. But the satisfaction, that was mine entirely. My mother's face paled. She realized she had nothing left. The country club, gone. Their retirement funds, gone. The Mercedes repossessed. Every credit line maxed. Every hope gone. Their carefully constructed illusion of superiority and control dissolved into an almost poetic reckoning. For my part, I didn't gloat, I didn't shout. I didn't lean into triumph, I merely watched as the truth settled over them. As the life they had tried to take from me returned in ways they could not undo. And Rebecca, the foster daughter, the girl my mother had tried to train to replace me, had finally been freed from that life, thanks to the anonymous scholarship fund I set up. She had a full ride to college and a living stipend. She sent me a photo of her dorm room once, and I kept it on my phone for weeks. A quiet reminder that the real victories often weren't about punishment, they were about justice, opportunity, and timing. As I watched my parents fumble, the last piece of the puzzle fell into place. 7 years of patience, 7 years of survival, of learning, of building, and now the weight of their betrayal met the weight of my resolve. The reckoning wasn't over, but it had arrived, and for the first time in my life, I could finally breathe. The story was far from over, because even when you win, the world keeps turning. And I had plans that would ensure no one could ever underestimate me again, and quietly, perfectly, the universe had balanced its books. The house was silent when I finally stepped inside. My heels clicked against the marble floors, echoing in the empty halls like a soft reminder of the years that had led me here. The estate was everything my parents had ever dreamed of. Yet the feeling wasn't about possession. It was about peace, about seeing a life rebuilt from ashes. Without needing anyone's permission, I set down the same backpack I had carried that day 7 years ago. Dusty, worn, a symbol of everything I had endured. For a moment, I let myself sit, alone in that quiet space. The silence wasn't heavy, it was patient. It held all the moments of fear, hunger, betrayal, and despair that had once seemed endless. Outside, the winter sunlight glinted off the pool. I could see my parents' old neighborhood from the balcony, the streets they had walked thinking they controlled everything, the country club gates, the houses they had envied. I thought about how meticulously the world had arranged itself so that they would learn exactly what it felt like to lose what they had taken for granted. I didn't need to call them. I didn't need to gloat or explain. Justice, in its quietest form, was enough. It was in the foreclosures, the lost memberships, the vanished fortunes. It was in the fact that every move they had made to control me was now irrelevant. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stepped onto the balcony. The city stretched out below, alive and unaware of the small, invisible victories that had quietly been stitched into its fabric. Rebecca was thriving. The scholarship fund had given her freedom and opportunity. Sarah had her diner, her sanctuary. And her unwavering kindness had been repaid in ways that mattered more than money. Marcus's investment had multiplied beyond what either of us imagined, but more importantly, he had believed in me when no one else did. I took a deep breath. For 7 years, I had carried the weight of betrayal, survival, and silent calculation. Now, I could finally let it settle, the anger, the pain, the hunger for justice. They were no longer my companions. They had done their work and quietly stepped aside. The world was still moving, life would still challenge me. But the chapter with my parents, the chapter of abandonment, lies, and stolen futures is closed. I smiled, not out of triumph, but from the simple satisfaction of quiet balance, the kind of satisfaction that doesn't need witnesses, applause, or acknowledgement. It just exists. And as I sipped my coffee, the first real warmth in years, I realized something. Survival isn't enough, redemption isn't loud, and revenge, when patient and measured, doesn't have to be dramatic. It just arrives and sometimes that's enough.